Do not come. 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 Do not come.
Bethany, are your children afraid of monsters in the attic or under the bed?
Yeah, they have been, but we always tell them that they do not exist.
Today we have news. There are monsters in Uncle Sam's attic.
Guess what this is? Guess what this is? For me, it's a revisit. This was posted back in August, believe it or not. And these are training videos for Trump's new administration. Okay, these are like orientation training videos for Project 2025 specifically. And it's quite a crack up because it is dead serious. Watch.
The words, phrases, definitions that are used, which may look like one thing, but absolutely mean another. And it is scary.
During this training, we will identify the problem, discuss examples from our time in the federal government, as well as the 5 cross-cutting principles of the current administration. We will teach you how to unwind the words and phrases that have been so artfully layered into every document in the federal government. You can do this in any role at any level of seniority. This training will prepare you to make changes and fast.
Notice how they're talking really slow and it's almost like a first grade level, right? It's because they know damn well that their new crew would be idiots. And in my opinion, this is suitable for someone with like absolutely zero experience in any paid position before. Right? I mean, they're really breaking things down, talking slowly. Like, it's crazy. And it gets worse.
The left continually pivots and assaults definitions and phrases. They twist words and phrases to support subconscious acceptance of a philosophy that was rejected or is against the grain of human existence, like, what is a woman? Perhaps the most effective tool the left wields is their ability to engage in constant subliminal advertising through their
That's another thing to catch on to here. The hypocrisy. The hypocrisy is out the roof.
Narrative, words, and phrases. Marxism became socialism, then democratic socialism, and is now represented by the terms social justice and equity. This is perhaps the most scary of all.
Katie, what brings to mind is the quote, "He who controls the language rules the world." It's attributed to Joseph Stalin and other tyrants. And George Orwell stated, "He who controls language controls culture." Even more, Hitler and others lived by the creed. If you repeat a lie often enough, people will believe it, without doubt.
Well. You know, a lot of things that they do, a lot of their habits and stuff, the answers or like the story behind them will definitely reveal themselves. And, you know, these are about 24 videos. The training videos altogether are 14 hours long. Okay, I sat through most of them. And this was like back in October or something when I did. But I revisited them just yesterday. And I don't even remember them being as like... basically like as tacky and like kindergarten level as they are, and just the classic groundwork for any authoritarian government. It's pretty laughable, but like in a shitty way because it is our reality. It's like this is what they're going by.
It's true. Language is a powerful and often controlling tool.
Career bureaucrats and the left are also using language to change culture and gain more and more authority, thereby upsetting the balance of power envisioned by our founding fathers. This, in essence, weaponized language against the American people.
This training is vital to you as a political appointee. If there's one thing you take from this training, it is to know when you start your job as a political appointee, every single word, phrase, and acronym must be vetted, and you must determine what implications every word has before publishing or moving forward with any official or internal document.
Our engagements in the United Nations. From our experiences, we will teach you how to identify the left's progressive language scrutinize career staff compositions for dangerous language,
scrutinize career staff. So the staff that's already there, they kind of target them a lot throughout these videos.
and how to combat their manipulative efforts, ensuring clarity of definition and conservative intention. Bethany is incredibly helpful.
I'd be happy to, absolutely. The 5 topic areas.
Okay, now pay attention to these topic areas
For today's discussion,
especially in the order that they list
are centered on women, children, and family, environment, human rights and border security, the gender cult, and equity. The first topic, women, children. You can read more about this in the course materials section. Now, let's talk about the word abortion. The left got very creative years ago and started using different words to make abortion sound a little less like murder. For example, sexual and reproductive health, reproductive rights, sexual and reproductive health services, reproductive health services, sexual and reproductive health and reproductive rights, sexual and reproductive health and rights.
Oh my God. Okay, the Project 25, Project of the 25, the Grand Project 2025, of the 2025 Project Grand, 2025 Service Project Grand. Like, that's literally what they just did.
All of these include abortion. For years, we knew that the terms above that I just mentioned had been used and that they were code for abortion. The left and the career bureaucrats at state and USAID told us, oh, no. But then when I was negotiating with Canada for the G7 Development Ministerial, I said, well, can we counter what the Trump administration was doing to protect life? Language matters.
Bethany, it's incredible how the left is able to make killing children and babies a pro-movement. I mean, their narrative is just incredible and so opposite of what the reality of the situation is in the environment.
It's a great point, Katie. They don't stop. Climate change, allegedly, is everywhere. And if the American people elect a conservative president, his administration will have to eradicate climate change references from absolutely everywhere. And according to our intelligence community, the number one threat facing our country today is...
Guess. Guess what it is.
Drumroll, climate change. Not Russia, not China, not AI, climate change. This...
Not Russia, not China, not AI, climate change. This was back in August. They've been planning this for years, okay?
is how the federal government is all in on this issue. And climate change activists wield a lot of power in every dimension of life through their skewed terminology and definition. When I arrived at USAID, I had a career employee ask me how many children I had. I thought it was a bit odd of a question, but to be kind, I answered and I said I had 3 children. And he actually said to me, "Oh wow, 1.5 too many for the environment."
That did not happen. That's not a real story. That never happened. Who the fuck says things like that? There's nobody that would say shit like that, actually, except their own people. Not about that, but only they say stupid shit like that about weird shit. That's such a fucking dumb story.
I smiled and I said very politely, if I could have 10 more children, I would.
Yeah, sure, she was so polite during that. It's hard to believe that this bitch was in charge of anything, like presidential or whatever.
The policy book captures the essence of climate change, human rights and border security. So rights, rights, rights. The left is always coming up with new rights. In the Trump administration, we countered.
It's not that the left's always coming up with new rights, it's just that the right doesn't know anything at all. They never learned a single one of them. So when the left brings up an actual right, they're like, oh, that's made up because I didn't hear about it, because the only right they've ever heard of was the right to bear arms. If it's not that one, then nothing else exists to them. Then everything's a new right to them.
Human rights with unalienable rights. The careers went absolutely crazy at USAID. But thankfully, President Trump had established a commission on unalienable rights at the State Department, and we would just point back to the commission and funding priority. Perhaps most commonly known are the
Man, her thin-veiled bitterness is just bursting at the seams, isn't it?
changes to Title IX, giving institutions, schools, control over children and their gender preference, working against parents, mandating boys compete against girls. This is all done with words. Words matter. Change the words, change the culture.
Okay, this next chapter, they have some fucking nerve to say the art of professionalism, but the professionalism in their eyes is just hilarious. I mean, these are 100% serious training videos, okay? These got leaked. They didn't put this out themselves. These got leaked somehow, and this is probably one of the chapters that stood out to me the most. You'll see why.
All right, so we're here to talk about professionalism, the art of professionalism. There are a few things that you're going to want to keep in mind as we're having this conversation today. The first of those is that things are a little bit different now than they have been in years gone by. All right, so the first thing that any professional needs to know is that there's no such thing as a good professional who can't do their job. So
Okay.
competence is the first thing that I want you all to think about when.
And in case you guys don't know what competence is, we are going to talk slow and show you the definitions and break things down slowly because we know you only made it to 3rd grade.
Comes to professionalism. What does competence mean? Well, it means that whatever your job description is, your boss is relying on you to do that on time and with excellence. And so you should be striving for those kinds of things.
You could have the answers to yourself first. Have the answers to yourself first. So that's a great piece of advice that I learned firsthand was,
Well, look who has a huge part to do with this.
figuring out all of the answers to all of the questions that I had, using my colleagues, using the resources that were given to me in the White House press office before I took that to my boss. And many times you'll realize you can solve problems on your own before you bug your superior with them.
That's so spectacular. Thank you so much. In addition to being good at your job, you want to be someone who knows answers, right? So there's what am I supposed to do? What am I getting paid to do? And then there's the background, the theory, as it were. And that's sort of like if someone picks up the phone and calls my department with a question, not with a request, but just with a question, do I know how to answer it or how to steer them towards the person who knows how to answer it? Mm-hmm. Am I what we call a subject matter expert? Mm-hmm. Am I an expert? You should be an expert at your own job. That is a true professional.
There's a few different types of knowledge too that I came to learn on the news of the day. It was part of my job to prepare the press secretary for her daily briefings in the White House podium, and I wanted to make sure that I knew the news as much or if not better than she did. So,
well, you fucking suck at that, don't you, Caroline?
She had a question, she could come to me and I would provide her an answer. So being well-read is a great way to acquire knowledge. You have the resources that you need at your fingertips in this digital age, so use them. And the most well-read person in the room is usually the one.
So if you don't know the answer to anything, which you won't, you can just use your phone because that's professional.
Who's going to have an answer for their boss.
Behavior if staff members were signing the President of the United States autograph without his consent.
Is on the record talking about issuing preemptive pardons to these people.
But was he aware of his signature being used on every single pardon? That's a question you should ask the Biden
Is there
White
any
House.
evidence on that he wasn't aware of it?
You're a reporter, you should find out.
So fast forward to today, she doesn't have the fucking answers, phone or not. She sucks.
Such good feedback. Someone that is dependable.
Let's rewind that.
You're a reporter, you should find out.
That's such good feedback. Someone that is dependable, who if you say something will happen by Friday.
Here's one that's like the most common sense thing ever, but just watch how he explains it at the end.
And it's Thursday afternoon and you're not where you want to be. Looks like you might be having a late night at the office, right? Because I said I would get it done by Friday, and a professional gets done what they say they're going to get done. And the other thing is, If in that same exact scenario, well, then it's like 6 p.m. and I get a phone call from a family member. I've got to go respond to something. And so I don't get this work done by Friday. I have to own that. I have to say, I know that I said it would be done by Friday and I have failed to do it.
So if you don't get your job done, then just say, hey, I didn't get my job done. And that's it. You don't have to do shit. You could be really bad at your job. You won't get fired, but just make sure you say, hey, I didn't do this. Sorry. And everyone's just gonna have to deal with it. Because that's how you do things in the White House now.
Here's what respect, and treat yourself with respect. So don't be groveling and don't be arrogant. Carry yourself as though you're someone who deserves to be where you are, because
This is like literally kindergarten level shit. It's fucking insane that they actually had to take the time to make these videos for the people that they're fucking hiring, because that's how little they expect from these people.
you are.
Top tip that you would share with new political appointees?
Yes, learn the lingo. I believe a smart way to approach federal service.
This is fucking hilarious. Everything this lady says is like, notice how all the women in these training videos, they make them, well, they brought in the dumbest bimbos in the world, but you'll see that all the men, none of the men are like in any way close to like how clueless these women are.
This is a political, is to look at it like you're learning a foreign language, especially if you're coming into service like I did with little or no experience with the federal government. Federal employees use a lot of acronyms. In my very first job, I was at an executive level, and on my first day, the staff was trying to brief me, and they just used acronym after acronym, and I was trying to Google under the table so I could look, very competent to them, until I realized, people in the middle of the country don't talk like that. And so when you are serving the public, when you're serving the citizens of this country as a federal employee, you should speak like they do. So I asked them to stop using acronyms and actually use the words. And that was very helpful.
Katie, that's great advice.
So to learn the lingo, you have to go in there and ask them not to use their lingo. And then now you're learning the lingo because they're fucking using the same language as every average citizen.
Yeah, and Bethany, there's also nuances to the phrases and words which are used universally, and you have to figure out how they are applicable. For instance, when a federal employee uses the word policy, they're typically using a policy to say why they can't perform a task that you've asked them to do. This policy is something that was probably developed internally prior to you getting there by the last administration, or even years and years before. With that, what do you do if this policy exists?
So what do you do?
Yeah. And in that case, you ask for the policy and you ask to see it in writing. And it's somewhat stunning how that you find that frequently they cannot provide that in writing.
I've heard that.
So then you try to.
I've heard that. Okay, so she's saying, oh, sometimes there's a policy and it's either already made within the same year or maybe even years before. And so they bring in this policy and you don't know about it. So then you ask them, here's something clever. You ask them, can I have it in writing, please? And you'd be surprised that they never have it in writing. And she goes, yeah, I've heard that.
Look back historically, where did it emanate from? And so what you first do is, if you can get it in writing, you look at it, and then you see if you can either redact it, if it's an internal policy, and you can say this is no longer the policy. You can replace it with something that is more in line with the president that you're serving and his or her priorities. Or if it's not in writing, then at that point you can say this is a policy that you've been following, but it's not actually a policy that's on the books. And
so if they do happen to give you a policy and you don't, so if they do, just by chance, which is the most rare thing ever, then you can redact all the parts you don't understand. And if that's not the case, then you can just make up your own policy and then just tell them, hey, we're going to go by this policy now, because it's aligned with what the president wants. What in the
inform everyone, we will no longer be following that policy. And actually, the federal employees, once you were able to speak their language, were very responsive and had an.
Okay, once you learn an abbreviation or two, or an acronym or two, then they're more responsive. Yeah, no shit, because you finally fucking learned part of their language, their lingo.
Your time with changes.
Interesting. So it's all about learn the lingo to be able to speak their language.
Quite a way to learn the lingo.
So if you ask most people, it's pretty clear that most mainstream media outlets are to the left. Remember how I talked about having some sort of self-ownership before you go into serve in an administration? This is where it becomes important. Because if you are working...
Listen to this guy. He's talking about the media, okay? Tell me if this isn't brainwashing for you.
With a New York Times reporter who covers your beat or whatever you're responsible for communicating to the American public, if you are in a position where you crave their approval, you're going to mess up. You're going to do something wrong. If the New York Times is writing a glowing profile on you, the person who's supposed to be behind the scenes, you're doing something wrong. Not only because
anytime you get like an amazing offer from New York Times or some kind of, publication that you admire, then you're doing something wrong.
Because you're frankly getting a little outside of your lane, but also because they are certainly to the left. And if you're serving a conservative administration, you should not be getting
anything that isn't our publication is going against us.
Reviews from the left. I can guarantee you they are not working with you if you're in a conservative administration to implement the president's agenda. Actually, to the contrary. They want leaks to stymie any type of conservative administration agenda. So this is important to keep in mind because whenever you're in a position of trust for the public, there are these many opportunities to leak information to the press, where almost every time it is not in your interest. But the thing that they always try to dangle in front of you is, oh, you're going to get that lunch meeting or that coffee meeting with this legacy outlet, and they're going to say how helpful you were. It's not that helpful to you. It's not that helpful to the president's administration. And they're trying to get you to trade in your access and your promise to implement the president's agenda so that they can get their next headline.
As we all seek
You think you're interested, but you're actually not.
To advance the president's agenda for the good of the nation. Our next two tips will help you navigate challenges surrounding career bureaucrats and the
You know what's crazy is look at how fucking weird these women look. These women look all like Stepford wives, like super weird.
To advance the president's agenda for the good.
And they talk fucking weird and shit. But let me give you a glimpse of what the rest of the videos look like. All the men. Tell me if you notice a difference.
Career bureaucrats and the
So could you talk a little about the different phases of a transition you had? The phase when you were working on
the laws of nature and nature's God. There are truths that are knowable that can be the guide and the ground for politics.
Orientations examined by GAO. Object, organization, process, and program.
Michael, I want to see if you wanted to add some more color to what Tom said. Maybe share some experiences with IGs and GAO. I know you have a lot of those.
Yeah, with GAO, as Tom mentioned, they're supposedly
the kind that political appointees engage in is not subject to these same rules and these same standards.
You're going to find out if one of them is stealing money from you, unless it's the one who's chalking up who's the process. And then you got to keep a good eye and have a good person in charge of that.
Notice that last one, huh? I added that one last for a reason. But it's a world of difference, right? I noticed that they do still tell the people to talk a little bit slower and a lot more clear, but it's it's for the most part, all these men just talk very like intelligently and they're not like, gee, I think that this is bad. It's just fucking weird the way that they portray women in that. But anyways, there's going to be a part 2 to this because the second half needs a whole video of its own because it's starkly different and it's a stark difference and it exposes a lot more about how they're able to get away with what they're getting away with today. So anyways, that's it. Okay, bye.
Do not come. Do not come. Do not come. Do not come.